Whew. Okay, hello everyone. Let people join. Some folks come in. Hi everyone. Hollis, just check on your email because I might need, in case things don't run as smoothly as I'd like, I might need you to call Carrie just to make sure she knows how to use this. I don't think she's on yet. Hi everyone, welcome, welcome. Hollis, I sent you Carrie's number in case she's not figured it out. So if it's a few more minutes before she comes on, we will. Can y'all hear me? Can people hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, great. Awesome. Welcome, welcome everyone. Just waiting on Carrie to join. Let me see if she's good. Ah, there goes Carrie. Welcome. I'm going to request you right now. And you're just going to accept the request. Much love to you all. Hi, Ray. Feel free to y'all to bring in your questions too. Come on, internet.
Kind of like this.
Waiting for it to connect. Hopefully it'll connect soon. Hi, Chad. Okay, I'm going to send, it says Carrie was unable to join. I'm going to send the request again, Carrie, and you're just going to accept it. Yes, I see you.
Okay, oh, good.
You just want to turn your camera the other way because you're sideways.
It has to be this way?
Yeah.
Oh, bummer. My least favorite position. But fine, I can see you. Great.
You look wonderful. Welcome.
You look beautiful.
Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome everyone who's joining into the live right now. We're about to have an incredible conversation with Carrie Mae Weems, my inspiration. And I'm so honored to have her. For those of you who do not know about Voices, Voices is a new interdisciplinary performance arts project and campaign grounded in Black women's stories for Vida to unify the vision of ending violence against women, cis women, trans women, non-binary people across the African continent and the African diaspora. And our goal is to use art to embody and inspire solidarity making in our collective imagination, especially right now. We're so grateful to have the one, the only, the incredible Carrie Mae Weems for this conversation, which is titled Living in the Changing Same. Carrie Mae Weems, through image and text, film and performance, and her many convenings with individuals across a multitude of disciplines, Carrie Mae Weems has created a complex body of work that centers on her overarching commitment to helping us better understand our present moment by examining our collective past. Weems has received a multitude of awards, grants, and fellowships, including the MacArthur Genius Grant, the U.S. Department State of Medals of the Arts, what else? The Joseph H. Hazen Rome Prize Fellowship from the Academy in Rome, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Louis Comfort Tiffany Award, among many, many others. Her major solo exhibitions of work include Carrie Mae Weems, the Museum Series, the Studio Museum in Harlem, New York, and Carrie Mae Weems' 3 decades of photography and video. There's so much more I can say, but I was able to first meet Carrie at the Black Portraitures Conference years ago in Paris. Woo! And then after that, I was invited to be a part of her show at the Guggenheim, which was, I mean, historical, and the ways that you were able to bring so many Black artists together in that space and use your opportunity, your grand moment to include all these voices. I guess I wanted to start with where does that come from? Where does that legacy and that tradition of each one pull one up, you know, that we see in the way that you've moved as an artist? What has instilled that value system in yourself?
Well, I'm extraordinarily selfish and amazingly curious. And first of all, thank you. Thanks for the invitation to join you. It's really wonderful to see you, and it's really terrific to be a part of your changing same. In your sort of deep investigations, and and I'm just gonna say this to the audience. I have no idea who's listening out there, and where you're dialing in from and zooming from and looking from. But I do remember Aja from the portraiture exhibition and program that was organized by my closest friend and dear colleague, Deborah Willis. And so I was there, of course, to support her. And I remember Aja walking onto the stage and opening her mouth. And I heard this sound rooted in great history and great discipline and great culture. And I knew at that very moment that a brilliant young star had just been launched into the satellites, and that we would be seeing more and more and more of your work and following you for years to come. And I was not wrong. So it's really great to be here with you. And I think maybe Aja, in some ways, maybe we have like similar sensibilities. That you are engaged. You are engaged in the moment. You're engaged in the moment for yourself. You're engaged in the moment out of your own curiosity, out of your own commitment, out of your own passion, out of your own desire to know, to learn, to seek, to question, to pose sort of critical, dynamic questions for the moment. And I am simply deeply curious. I'm interested in knowing what other artists are doing. And I'm interested in also understanding the context in which I am situated in. And I can only do that by being in constant dialogue and open dialogue and research and investigation with other artists and other people of like mind. And when I say other artists, I mean artists from many, many different kinds of disciplines, whether they are writers, or poets, or visual artists, or dancers, or choreographers, political intellectuals, public intellectuals, poets, etc. I'm really interested in what cultural workers are doing, because I believe in the deepest way we are the crafters. We are the crafters of the expression of the moment. And so that's really where it kind of comes from. And right now I'm actually working on another huge project for the Park Avenue Armory for next year, where, maybe I'm inviting another 150, 200 artists, visual artists for exhibitions, performance artists, singers, dancers, and Tyreek Trotter of The Root actually is helping me to design and lead the performance aspect in this. And I'm hoping that you'll join me.
I'm there whenever you need me.
Hope that you'll join me.
I wanted to think about, in the piece that you shared with us of Hold On Tight, you talk about your mother. And I think that a lot of the foundations of all of our, the beginnings of how we deal with our interior world and the ways that we manage the exterior world and that balance starts with our relationship with those most closest to us, those who we hold dear, and the struggles that they have to kind of move in the world and to be and to exist and to create. And so I wanted to know, what about your mother, your upbringing, inspired your lens, your perspective on the artistic practices that you engage in as now an artist who's renowned around the world?
Oh, for many, many, many years, I thought that I took after my father. Right? My father was this sort of huge presence in our house, this, gregarious, charming, handsome, funny human being. And I adored him. And my mother was very much the disciplinarian in the family, but also kind of stood in my father's shadow. My mother also adored my father. My mother said to me once that for me, the sun rose and set in your father, right? And so it was really only after my father died and my mother, who had lost her first sibling, took the stage at the church, to the podium at the church, and she opened her mouth and she began to speak. And I thought, oh my God, this is my mother. This sense of compassion and understanding, love unconditionally, profound knowledge, and profound grace. I was just bowled over by her. And over the years, I've simply grown ever more in love with her as a human being and grateful to call her my mom. Fortunately, I still have her, and we still talk regularly, and we have really great conversations. So, she is the curious one. She's, sort of quiet, very anchored and centered in her life, and centered in her family, centered in her faith, centered in her beliefs. Um, and I think that that's what I get mostly from my mother. That sort of grounding, even though I'm a little wilder for sure. There's no doubt about that. And I live a very different kind of life. Um, Being anchored in this very deep African American family, and knowing from whence I came, has been a blessing. And it allows me, I think, to go out on great limbs and know that I can come back to something that's rooted in the earth, that I have a place that I can return to. And so I'm very grateful for the meaning of my mother and for the meaning of motherhood. I've always thought that if I could be half of the woman that my mother is, that I'd be doing all right. She's pretty special. But I'm surrounded, I think, by a group of sort of extraordinary women in my family. Very strong, very disciplined, but all of them very much the same in their anchoring, in their centeredness. And I think that that becomes very, very important. And as I age, I understand it even more, the importance of that.
That's so beautiful. I was thinking about what is it to be Carrie Mae Weems in this moment, to have lived through so many life-changing, tragic and beautiful historical moments in our country, but also in our communities, and to constantly be an artist in contemplation, in practice, in creation. And you talked about in your piece, living in that changing same. And so I wanted to know, I thought I saw this other piece that Amir Baraka wrote about blues and music on the changing same. And there's other pieces that artists have created about this concept. And I wanted to know, what does it mean to you? What does the changing same mean to you? Especially now when it seems like we're still celebrating firsts as if that's something to be glad about, but it's even more kind of striking to realize that we live in a world where we have to celebrate the first Black this, the first this, and that sometimes that framework, the critical thinking skills that our country needs to push forward in the change, seems like it's the art is the thing that's being devalued a lot as we progress culturally. But people still find ways to continue to exist and create and resist the climate we're in. So I wanted to know, what does it mean for you? What does the changing same mean to you now?
It's interesting. I mean, I think that, that there's that idea that, there's one step forward and two steps back. There's this sort of constant, right? That movement of being, in some curious way, all life is in it's both static and it's dynamic. And social conditions are static and dynamic, right? And what we do, when you sort of look at, whether you're looking at a strand of DNA or you're looking at inside a, a shell, there's always something that's spiraling, right? Right? The DNA is a set of spiral. Nature is a set of spiral. Humans are a set of spiral, right? And so you're always coming back to the place that you were. You're always coming back to the place that you were. And every time, hopefully, that you come back to the place that you were, to that spot on the continuum, is that you are slightly at a different elevation, right? You're slightly at a different, elevation every time you go around the bend, right? That
Mhm.
idea of, going slightly higher, slightly higher, right? And sometimes collapsing, right? And so for me, that is the changing same, that idea that you're always coming back around to the same place, but slightly higher ground. So that then that allows you to do, what that allows you to do then is to develop, I think, a critical lens, right? It's a thing that allows you to see ever more deeply into the patterns that hold us in a certain place and the patterns that hopefully relieve us and allow us to grow, even as we understand that we are in a very similar place. So, for instance, if we look at, you and I worked together on my project Grace Notes, which was looking at the killing, the murders of police violence, and the ongoing killing of young Black men primarily and women, right, in this country, right? But then we came to like George Floyd. Then we came to George Floyd on the continuum of police violence directed against Black people. And suddenly, not only did Black people rise up, but across the world, for the first time in history, and for the first time in 400 years since Black people have been enslaved in this country, millions of people for the first time understood something about what it meant to be Black in America, right? And so even though we are still dealing with sort of ideas about violence and police violence and violence that's directed us against us in this very profound way, something has happened in this moment that allows not only Black people, but the world to reflect not only on Blackness, but on whiteness in a way that they've never had to confront whiteness before, in a way that they've never had to confront privilege before. And so suddenly, there are, everywhere I look, there are all of these sorts of uh, 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 institutions that for the first time ever, examining who they are in relationship to Blackness. Every single cultural institution out there is trying to figure this out, right? We've been talking about it for years. I've been talking about it for years. I've made any number of projects around it for years, right? But it took the life of George Floyd and in this moment in the midst of a pandemic and all of these dots coming together for not only for you and I to say it and to understand its importance, but finally for the world to understand it too in a way that they've never really been able to articulate or to express before. And so it is change and it is the same. But it's really an amazing thing. And I think of him every day. I kept thinking, Then Came You, that song, Then Came You, right? George Floyd's daughter walked up to, I think maybe it was Biden, and she said, my daddy changed the world. So we're on to something. Yes, I think, for all of you young African-American artists and writers and thinkers, doers and makers, this is an incredible moment. It offers us an unprecedented opportunity not to be opportunist, but to take advantage of some extraordinary opportunity and change that's going on. So cultural institutions are contacting me daily about what's going on, who are some of the young African Americans out there that they might need to consider for their institutions. They know that they've not paid attention. And so now they're trying to do the corrective, which is the right thing to do.
What are your thoughts on one of the things that one of the elders that I look to is Baba Abiodun of The Last Poets, and one of the things that he says, I always try to ask our elders, like, what are things that they wish could have been done differently or that they could have worked on that did not come into fruition. And a lot of times he talks about the wish that we would have left institutions behind, that we should have done more create institutions for our communities and for people in our neighborhoods. And what are some of the things that you feel like you've learned over time that lessons about looking back, you know, as someone who looks back often in your work, what do you see when you look back? What are some of those reflections that you have had?
Well, you know, I think that there are many, Aja, but you know, I'm so grateful for all of the younger people your age, of your generation, working, who are out here, I think, in sort of extraordinary ways on the front line, you know, who understand the importance of change. But you know, there are a couple of things. One, you know, what is change and what are you looking for, right? What are the, you know, how do we, you know, think more critically about systems of government? Do we have the kind of government that will ultimately allow us to be successful? I think that that's one of the, I think that the voices are there, but I don't necessarily think that understanding of like political institutions is there. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping that your generation will get to and understand. You know, how do we start to think about governmental change? You know, and you know, I just finished a piece about democracy, and I would play it for you, but I don't know how to do all of this and play something too. But it's called The Search, and it's on YouTube, and it was just presented by the Shed last week. You know, where is democracy? How do we find democracy? Where is democracy to be located? And what does democracy mean? We've been living in a constitutional democracy, in a republic, for 400 years, but that hasn't had much to do with our lives in very, very serious and substantive ways, right? And so that's one thing, right? You know, questioning and being really critical and understanding criticality in relationship to the system, not simply to criticize it, but to rather to posit new directions, right? So what does that look like? And I'm very actually interested in having that conversation. You know, the future is now and we are it, right? And now, you know, what is the shape of the future that you imagine for yourselves, not simply as individuals, but as a collective? Then there's, I think, sort of like the question of institutions. You know, during this pandemic, you know, 40% of Black businesses are gone. So when we talk about institutions, we talk about business, we talk about levels of support. How is that to be generated, and by whom, and under what circumstances, right? So you have a millionaire over here and a billionaire over there, right? But so when I drive through my community, I'm looking at a dead community, right? I'm looking at a few, bad, fucked up bodegas over here, and a couple of community centers that are trying to hold on in some way to the community, but I'm not seeing great energy. And this is true in many cities, major cities across the country, primarily across the country, right? So New York might be unique, LA might be unique, Atlanta is unique, but in terms of sort of systematic, structures of care, they are almost non-existent, right? And so I think that, so how do we need to think about that?
I think
how do we need to think about that?
I think about when you said systematic structures of care, the importance of care and nurturing as implemented as a systematic goal, right? It seems like for so much of the American in, you know, history, the history of America as a country, care has never, the word care and the idea of taking care of each other in theory kind of seems to be the language of the country, but in practice. And so I think about how in our communities on a smaller scale, how the household has been its own governing space, the space where we have had to learn how to take care of ourselves because we know that there's no Messiah coming to save us. And so I think in this moment, we learn about George Floyd, but we also learn about Oluwatoyin Salau, this young Black woman who was murdered by a Black man in Tallahassee, and the violences that we have in the interior nature of our communities around care. Like, what does it look like for us to care for each other, is such a crucial conversation, because yes, there are systemic structural things that we have to change. But I think a big part of the inability for people to imagine or to work towards some of those structural changes is because we have not worked to really change and heal how we see ourselves and how we see each other. And so I wanted to ask you about
That's
your
very
journey
important.
as an artist, as a Black woman,
Mhm.
to learn to love and care, and what are examples of people in your life, Black women or men otherwise, that have showed what and demonstrated the values of care, because our society is really different than when you were growing up. You know, there's a whole different orientation around me, myself, and I, and what I need to get and how I need to move to survive, because capitalism is on steroids, you know. So there's, and then now we are in a pandemic and we're seeing mutual aid funds. We're seeing really interesting ways that people are responding to this moment. But there are some lessons that I think some of us did not learn. And so I think it's important to learn from others who have lived longer, who know more, and who also have shown other examples. What does care look like on a personal level? And then how do we implement, like, what does that look like in an imaginative way and a
Mhm.
structural level?
Oh, every day I come to my studio and I listen to the same set of the same playlist uh, every day, not like every other day, every day. And I've been doing it for years. And the first song that I listen to almost every morning, that I exercise to, I meditate to, I sort of prepare myself to, and often I listen to it also at the very end of the evening, or just before I go upstairs for dinner, is Ode to Life. I listen to Ode to Life, and then that's followed by Stevie Wonder's Love's in Need of Love Today. And then that's followed by Bob Marley's Could It Be Love? That's followed by Come Sunday. That's followed by You Gotta Be Free. That's
Mhm.
followed by Stardust. Then it's followed by Alice Coltrane and Sun Ra and Pharoah. Love is Everywhere.
Woo!
That is what I listen to. That is what keeps me grounded, keeps me focused, keeps me sane. And so, you know, the love, ultimately has to start with you, right? If you can't give it to yourself first and foremost, right? If you have problems loving you, and we've been conditioned not to love ourselves, right? And to be hard on ourselves and to deny ourselves, I think it's this that much more difficult to offer it to others. So, what is love? One of the most difficult questions, right?
Mm.
That we have to ask ourselves. We use it, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. But what is it? What is that? Right? And each of us will come to our own understanding, and most of us will be grappling with it for the rest of our lives. But I think of it as being illumination. It is my gratitude and my thanks for the way in which your adoration illuminates me. That it's only through you that I'm able to see myself. I cannot see myself otherwise, right? I can only see myself because I see it being reflected back at me through you, right? And so my love is the thanks, the offering of goodwill that I can extend back to you, that I can extend to my husband, that I can extend to my partner, that I can extend to my family, and that then I can extend to my community, right? And so my sense is that my purpose is to figure out in every conceivable way in relationship to the work that I make, which is so deeply tied to the life that I live and to the beliefs that I hold, right? How do I share the bounty of the offering of goodwill to myself and to my fellow Americans and to those who are interested in being in dialogue with me through the work and with themselves through the work.
Oh, okay. That's a word. I wanted to ask, as a Black artist, as an artist in the world, um, what are the mediums that best represent or speak to the ways that you try to share and practice your values and the critical thinking that you have? Like, why photography? Why film? Why? What called to you in those practices and those mediums versus, all the
Something else.
other?
Oh, but I love all the others. You
Yeah.
know, I love dance. I love music. I
That's
love
what's interesting
theater.
about you, is because no one medium fully encapsulates who you are. You've performed in your own pieces. You've written poetry. You have filmed. You have taken photographs. I don't know if there are any Carrie Mae Weems paintings anywhere to be found.
There are a few.
But yeah, what
Yeah,
I
but
guess I guess what is
primarily,
the artistic gene about? What is it that pulls you out to create? And when did you first discover that calling to create?
oh, I've been an existentialist since I was a child. You know, and so always questioning, even as a young person. You know, I remember being like, about 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old, sitting on the back steps of my house, and everybody was out playing, and I was sitting there by myself, crying, saying, what is this? What is this thing? I think understanding for the first moment that I was an entity unto myself, that I was not my mother, my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, but this curious makeup of this human being who had these particular feelings in relationship to the world. Right? I would look at the sun and say, what's that? You know? Like, what is this thing that we're in? Trying to sort out so very early I have these sort of questions about life and living, and and I started drawing. I remember that, and then I remember drawing, right? And so I knew very early in my life that I was going to be an artist. I didn't really use that word, but I knew that there was something about the creative, something about movement and language and the way in which words could be used that interested me, and the way music could be played. And I played on my recorder and my flute. I mean, and so I was very interested, very, 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 very interested in the arts from the very beginning. And I would twirl in my house, and I would pretend like I was a ballerina, and I would paint in the attic, and I would pretend like I was living in Paris. And, just this very fanciful imagination. And so it's just from the very beginning. And then I got involved a little bit in theater when I was young. Teachers sort of saying, Carrie is sort of interesting. Let's get her involved in some things. And dance, people invited me to be a part of their companies very, very early, but I wasn't really interested. And then I had this boyfriend who was really an asshole in every other way, but he gave me a camera for maybe it was my 18th birthday. It was like either my 18th or my 20th birthday, one of those. And and he put it in my hand, and my life changed.
Mm.
I knew like exactly what I wanted to do with this thing. And it became this tool, this really, really wonderful tool, because I'm curious. And so I wanted to travel, I wanted to see things, I wanted to be in conversation with people. And it was this really wonderful way of using a thing to take me into the world, right? That will allow me to sort of be in the world and give me a great excuse for being in the world in a very particular kind of way. And then, of course, you know, so I took it from there. But that was sort of it.
What has been your, I personally have had a struggle to balance, and we were talking to Rada Blank last week about her struggle as a Black woman artist and understanding that somehow we're always supposed to be taking care of like other people and thinking about everyone else. And
Yeah.
not that so much, I would follow in the line like Emory Douglas would say, he doesn't believe in art for art's sake, right? That art has a function, it has a political purpose, whether you want it to or not in the world. It exists in the context of, it doesn't exist in an island unto itself. But I think sometimes it's really hard, as an artist myself who is so involved and invested in the community, to find ways to balance and invest in the art and in the craft. And I wanted to know, like, has that ever been a challenge for you? And what has been your journey as an artist to handle that balance? Because I think every Black artist comes to this question of, who are you creating for? Who is, why do you create? In what ways can we make democratized creation? How do we make it so that everybody has the ability to see themselves as artists and to be in love with the wonder of their own creativity? But at times there's like something about certain artists that I know who it's like they could not do anything else. They have no other way to contribute to society. And until we move into a world that values people more than productivity, artists will continue to seem kind of like a bourgeois thing that doesn't have any relevance. But I think we're constantly trying to push the country in ways, or push the imagination, forget the country, the imagination to places it has not been. And there's a struggle with that. There's despair sometimes with that, of feeling like you're somewhere and where you want things to be isn't. And all of us are in that struggle. It's not just artists. But I wanted to know, what is your personal, because I think it's to demystify the idea of, oh, I'm an artist, life is great. I mean, it's not always great. It's hard.
No, I mean, it's well, you've said much there.
Yeah. Sorry.
You've
I
said
went
much.
off on a trail.
No. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that, you know, historically, women have been known we are considered, and we are nurturers. It's a part of, it's like the best and worst thing about us. You know? It's the best and the worst thing about us. And so I'm constantly struggling. I constantly struggle with this question. Constantly. I'm always dealing with, how to take care of me and how to take care of this work and how to take care of my husband and my family and my mother and my brothers and my sisters and my daughter, and my friends and the community and all of these things that I care about. And all of these things that I care about. But the reality is that you really can't take care of anybody else unless you take care of you. That is the reality. And then, of course, there's something also kind of reciprocal in that, I am taken care of by taking care of my community, by taking care of the things that I love, by taking care of the things that give me great pleasure, and in part being of great service to my community, to my people, elevating them in all of their in various ways, in their madness and their insanity and their stupidity and their glorious and all of their sort of complicatedness gives me incredible pleasure, right? It gives me incredible pleasure. And it's the thing that I get up to every single morning. How do I do that, and how do I do it best, right? And every day, and probably for the rest of my life, I will be dealing with the question of balance, because we're always trying to figure out how to get on balance, right? The most important thing is to understand the value of the work that you're making. And I don't believe that everybody is an artist. And I don't believe that everybody has the capacity to be an artist. I work my ass off, right? And I do this every single day as though I have no name in the field, right? Because having a name in the field only matters to the extent that somebody might be willing to commission me to do something or pay me to do something. But ultimately, right, or buy a piece of my work. But ultimately, that's just a transaction out there, right? And I'm not making the work for money. I'm making the work because it really matters to me, right? That, you know, what I'm committed to matters to me, you know, and that I can figure out what the deeper ways are to communicate my expressive self in relationship to the time in which I live is my job and my responsibility to myself, first and foremost. And then I get a chance to share that with you, the likes of you, my public, fans, and even the people that hate me, even the people that are not interested in me. In one way or another, they have to deal with me too. Do you know what I mean? And so, you know, the idea, I think, the thing that, you know, that I want to say to you and to hopefully many of the other followers that are out there, you know, I think it's really important to go to the same place every day, to go to your desk, to go to your study, to go to your studio, to go to your corner, to go to your book, to, you know, wherever you can go, but to go to that space. If you are interested in being a creative entity, you have to go to that place every day. And the moment that you enter that space, you enter the field of work. I made a decision very early in my life. I wasn't able to completely articulate it earlier, but it was what I was doing. It was what I was called to do. And that was, I wanted to have an impact on the field. I wanted to have an impact on the way in which art was understood and how Black artists were understood within the field, right? And so then I was able to sort of pose a set of questions, not only for myself, but to other artists and to institutions that support those artists about the importance of a certain kind of criticism within the field, right? And so, you know, once you sort of make that decision that that there are sort of multitudes of work, you know, that there's there's the work that I do as an artist that I'm always making, I'm generating, whether it's, text or video or photography, or music and relationship. You know, like there are all of these spaces, right? And then there is the work of being in contact, right? The work in making contact with others, right? That can help you broaden the field. That can help you navigate the field. That is one of the spaces too that I think that we are not as strong as we need to be, as we sort of negotiate cultural work contemporarily. But I think it's really sort of really important of understanding the range of work that needs to be done and when to do it. And finally, and I've been dealing with this myself over the last couple of days. I was talking with the artist Jerry Allen. You met Jerry Allen the first time we performed at Charleston, at Spoleto.
Yeah.
And Jerry Allen talked about, really the essential need to get out of the way of the work, so that the work could do its job. And it's one of the hardest things to learn, and it's one of the hardest things to do. You know, that often we overthink, we overpush, we overanalyze, we doubt ourselves, we lose our faith, we lose our confidence, we get off center, and we're trying to wrestle. We're trying to wrestle with ourselves, right? You have a bad night's sleep, it's because you're wrestling with yourself, right? And that you're not giving space and room to ideas to be what they are and to do what they can do, right? And to be relaxed enough to know that if I stop fighting and struggling, that you'll allow the ideas to really sort of emerge in a way that is really quite extraordinary.
I
And so
think
I've been in
there's a
here.
myth of the art not being work. You know, there's this propaganda around artists just sitting around leisurely, and I think that has kind of really dehumanized the artist to not understand the impact. And we know in the pandemic what art has meant to the world. I mean, we could not survive this moment without that work that you're talking about. So I think the shifting of the narrative around art being actual work, like a labor. So I wanted to ask you about, what does that mean to be a cultural worker, to see yourself as a cultural worker?
Listen, it's a full-time job. This is a full-time job. You know, yesterday, uh, you know, I love flowers as much as I love anything else, right? I love to see a really beautiful bowl of flowers. And I love to have like flowers around me, and beautiful images that are just lovely. Images of the sea that allows me to expand my vision, right? When I stand in front of the ocean, I am standing, before the rolling tides of history, a body of water that has been on this planet for eons. We don't even know how long. Rolling, 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 right? Standing before history. And so to have beauty around us, I think, is really important. To have respite around us is really important. But I got up yesterday morning after battling with myself all night long, right? After battling with myself all night long, I felt like Jacob wrestling with the angels, right? Came down to my studio, did my little meditation, went to work at 7 a.m. and I left at 9:30 last night, right? And I was here on the phone. I was looking at my projects. I was contacting artists. I was developing the proposal, looking at contracts, right? Trying to make sure that I could offer the artists what they needed in order to do their work, looking at images related to my own production, right? So that I could figure out actually how to meet with my designers and my technicians in the next month in order to design this facility that I'm using at the Park Avenue Armory, right? And so negotiating contracts, negotiating ideas, talking to funders and to lenders, talking to like museums and gallerists and artists about the work they might, submit to the exhibition. I mean, the level and the detail of the work that entails is extraordinary. To be on the phone from 7 o'clock in the morning until 9:30 at night, with working in between, right? And then talking on the phone with, a New York Times reporter about another artist because I needed to support her, to make sure that, the writer was going to give her the kind of review that she needed, right? All of that is the work of caring for the community, right? So most artists are not thinking in the ways that I'm thinking about how to bring people together, but that's all right. This is simply the nature of my work. It's the thing that I want to do. Nobody asked me to do it. It's the thing that I want to do. Nobody can pay you to be committed. Nobody can pay you to be loyal, right? You either have it or you don't. You either want it or you don't, right? And so I'm operating, I know, on a slightly different plane, and I pushed myself very hard, but I pushed myself because there are certain things that I want to see happen in my lifetime, and that's starting to happen. That the field around contemporary visual art is finally cracking. It's finally opening up in a really substantial way, in a way that 20 years ago was simply unheard of, right? You know, now there are so many young artists that are out here that I don't know all their names. But when I was coming along, I knew everybody. I knew all the names. I knew all the major players, right? You know, we all knew one another because that's how small the art world was. And so there are different kinds of artists also. There are artists that are opportunists. There are artists that are careerists. There are artists that are only concerned with themselves and whether or not they're going to get whatever they desire in the field. And then there are those people who are really thinking about the field and about the community and about Blackness in relationship to the field. And that's where I find the most exciting work going on. Absolutely. And it's not to say that I'm not selfish. I have lots of selfishness in my system. I want to see my work prevail. Absolutely. I want to make a whole bunch of money. Absolutely. Do you know what I mean? But that's not the reason that I'm working. I'm working for something else. I'm working for something bigger. And it's actually bigger than me. The work that I make is, the best of my work is bigger than me. The best of my work is work that I still go to and I think, wow, where did that come from? I made that. That's pretty interesting, you know? And so, and I think that that's what I also mean by sort of getting out of the way of the work, right? That, you know, that something happens, something clicks, you know, in terms of sensibility, understanding the way that you're seeing the moment, the time is always essential, right? And something happens, something clicks where you sail, right? You just sail into the work, and before you know it, it's done. But there's a lot of work that goes really into that arrival, right? You know, you have to cross the sea first, right? You have to cross the rocky waters first, and then you can sail. You know, and I think that that's the part that you're talking about, that people don't understand the rockiness of the water, you know, the rolling waves and the clashing and the struggle of work. It looks easy, but it is not.
Well, thank you so much. We have 1 minute and 50 seconds, and I wanted to tell everyone who's on the live to please join V is for Voices. Visit our Instagram, follow us. We will have way more conversations. Black women artists, we want your submissions. Go to visforvoices.com and submit your poems, your songs, your praises, your visual artwork. If you're inspired by this moment, please consider, the deadline is December 31st, 2020. And we need art that speaks to this moment, and also art that imagines the world we want to see. So as we end with Carrie Mae Weems, who is such an inspiration, and it's been so great. I'm so grateful to have heard you. We have 60 seconds. What is the biggest thing you look forward to seeing right now in this moment?
I'm very anxious to see what young cultural makers will make of the moment. And I am anxious to speak with you, Aja, to bring you to the Park Avenue Armory, and maybe a group from Voices in order to have that stage, so that we can see actually what young people are doing and what is some of the best work that's out there. Some of the most critical, some of the most dynamic.
Thank you so much. I love you.
The same.
Keep creating, and Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Make
Yes,
sure you
thank you
support.
so much for having me. Whoever you are, I'm sorry I can't see you. Okay,
Bye, Carrie.
bye. Thanks so much.